Okay, so thanks, Flynn. As Flynn said, we're mentally friendly, and John is over here somewhere as well. John's the third wheel.
Right here now.
So we're going to talk about play today, and fundamentally we wanted to talk about what it meant to us. And we talked about it a lot, and Mentally Friendly is a business that is built on play, and we'll get to that in a sec. But what we want to talk about today is how play taught us, or me, or Nick, everything we know today, which is a pretty, wow, awkward, which is a pretty big statement. We'll get into what that means in a second. So I think first of all, it's important to say, we're not, psychologists or philosophers or academics, definitely not, as Flynn's quite nicely pointed out. But we're just business guys, designers and strategists and stuff like that, and entrepreneurs. So when we looked at play and what it meant to us, we wanted to talk more about what it means to us from a business point of view, and rather than what it means to the creative process and all that kind of stuff, which I know is what a lot of people think when they think about play. So first of all, we are very excited to be here. CreativeMornings is something that I've followed with fascination for years, and everything that Tina does is amazing, and I'm really excited that Flynn and the guys have brought it to Sydney. I think it's amazing for Sydney to have its own chapter, and there's been some really cool talks. And it's the 5th birthday today, so we want to say happy birthday to CreativeMornings, and we feel very, very privileged to be involved on this auspicious occasion.
Thanks, Flynn.
Thanks, Flynn. So I guess just to quickly introduce us, this is Nick. Wave.
Hi, Nick.
And I'm Ben. Nick's the creative director of Mentally Friendly, and I'm the strategy director. Which, what does that mean?
So, I think everyone knows what a creative director is, but in the context of this kind of talk, we wanted to talk about how play's taught us other things and how we've evolved over the years and stuff. And as a bit of trying to point out that, I guess, above and beyond creative direction, which is a very old kind of profession, I suppose, and has a very specific definition, there's a whole bunch of other things that we have become and I guess are. Things that you wouldn't expect me to do on a day-to-day basis as a creative director are warehouse and logistics, UX, I guess, is probably a bit more kind of usual. Fashion guru, thanks Ben, I guess. He put that one in there. And designer, and I guess we'll talk about how those things came about and why they're relevant to what I do.
So I've had a pretty varied career. So I'm the strategy director now, and I've been working with MF for about 5 years. When I started, I think there was 5 of us. Over that time, I've been project manager, I've been a strategist. I worked with Buzz, who thought I was a designer for 6 months, apparently. I've also been a coder. Before that, I was a DJ. These are some of the lovely people that work for us. And before that, at uni, I studied to be a lawyer, which is obviously a pretty far stretch from what I do now. And that's got a lot to do with what we want to talk about today, and about the fact that things have changed a lot from what they used to be in terms of how you study and how your career progresses and how you learn. And the fact that, if you exclude that, everything that I learned from there up, I've learned from playing and from doing and experiencing stuff, which is a fundamental shift in how we work these days. So the reason why we're here is MF. So Flynn gave us a really, really lovely introduction, so I won't dwell on this too much. But MF, as you can see, this is kind of playful in itself, but we like to say that we exist to help brands take advantage of digital opportunities, to understand what's possible, what works, and more importantly, what's going to work for them. So that means that we do a broad range of stuff, but we really work with brands on the digital strategy behind what they do online. In terms of the team, these are some of those guys here. We're a collection of hardworking, strategic thinkers, innovative designers, and fearless developers. So as a team, we do all those things. We do strategy, design, development. And we work with businesses small, large, new, and old, to help them find stability in a digital world, not just to do cool stuff, but to actually build businesses that exist online. And our friends call us MF, so if we refer to MF at any point, that's what we're talking about. So Nick's going to talk a little bit now about our approach to play and how we use what we call our playtime.
Yeah. So MF is obviously like a digital agency. Everyone understands what that is. We have sort of 5 main services, which is community marketing, branding for digital, which is a really big part of what we do, multi-channel marketing, mobile as its own sort of little quadrant there, and then e-commerce. But all those things, I guess, are what you would consider a digital agency to typically do. But what we've also done, and I guess what makes MF special, is we have either started completely ourselves or with other people, these 4 other businesses, which are in and of themselves like quite decent sized businesses. So starting with Grand Social in 2008, we launched our online store, which came out of working with lots of fashion brands to create online stores, and that was Australia's first, and as far as I know, one of the first in the world to aggregate fashion into one big store. I mean, I'm sure lots of people are doing it at the same time, but we sort of stumbled across that model through the process that we're about to talk about. Tractor, which I guess some people might know about, we are involved with very heavily and run with Flynn and Simon Pemberton. And that is very much, I guess, a result of the search for great designers and the search for people to fill our studio with. Then we've got brand dating, which is a data visualization tool for brands standing online. So I guess it's just like a software as a service platform, and that helps brands understand what their online kind of value is, and then find other brands that they might want to partner with. And then we have a studio in London, which I guess we pulled out for the purposes of this as like another business, because it specializes entirely in mobile, and it was also kind of created through like this want to learn about mobile.
So that's all great, and I guess it sounds like a bit of a joke, but like, how did a lawyer / DJ and 2 designers end up running a digital agency, an online fashion store, an industry school, and an online analytics service? Like, they're like completely different businesses, and like obviously, like, we didn't go back to school each time and learn how to, run the fashion industry. We didn't, go and like take social media courses. We didn't go and do a teaching degree. But what we did do is we played a lot. And by that I mean that to come up with the ideas, to come up with the insights and the way that we approach them, play played a massive part of the foundation in the creation of these businesses. So as a tool for ideation, as a tool for collaboration, and as a way of exploring all the different ways that these passions might actually come to life. And like I was saying, like, we're not unskilled, like we've all studied in certain ways, but we didn't just talk about working in fashion. We went and learned how we were doing it as it evolved. So that comes back to like the fundamental reason of why we play. So as human beings, we like learn by doing. Like, it's a fundamental piece of human nature. But for us, it's also the way that we discover the things we love. So it's part of that creative process of like, I went to uni and I studied law, but I then discovered that I learned that I love DJing. Thank you. But how do I do that? I just learned by doing. And the same goes with strategy and fashion and things like that. So we learn the things that we love through play in an environment that is without the pressures of your everyday working life. But then you also are able to explore their potential as work. So that's, I guess, a fundamental difference of what we're trying to talk about today is, aside from the stuff that you do as play, it's about how you can turn that into something that becomes a career or a business or something like that. And what we try and do is called play with a purpose. So it's about setting goals and actually having a framework for exploring those. Because play by itself is just play. It'll go round and round and round. But play within a framework for exploration with rules and with like an approach means you can genuinely discover new things and build them into something specific. And it's something that we apply at MF in terms of agile development as well.
Yeah, so I guess this is something that has been called agile recently, but I guess anyone who's been working with like technology for the last 10 years will probably have always been doing if they're successful at this point. Like, we call it agile now, but this concept of creating a framework through which discovery becomes part of the plan, not sort of part of failure or whatever. So I guess that's probably the best way to describe how play works for us.
Yeah, and that's not just limited to like building stuff, like developing stuff. We use it for the strategic process. It's how, as most people know, it's how creatives work. Exploring, pushing the boundaries and stuff like that. But it works across the entire way that business works now, and it's now, as I sort of touched on before, it's now a way that society works, in terms of the fast changing nature of how things happen. And as I said before, like I've had a number of different careers, and the progression through that has been through play. The old career path used to be quite simple, go to school, go to college, get a related job, because no one would hire you if you, like in another job, if you had qualification, no one would hire you as a strategist, for example, if you did a degree in engineering. If you did a degree in engineering, you went and became an engineer, working for BHP or something like that. You would then work in that same career for 30 to 40 years, and then you'd retire. That was how it worked. And in the 70s, the number of years you would spend in one job was roughly about 20 years. That was the time of like the long tail job. You would go, you'd work for BHP for 20 years, you'd maybe go and work in one other job, and that was the end of your career. Now something's changed. So now, starting in the late 90s and through the 2000s, you go to school, you maybe go to college, although non-traditional forms of education are becoming more and more popular. Maybe you get a related job. A lot of people did like I did and do a degree, and then spend 3 to 5 years at uni, get out and go, you know what, I don't want to do that. I've discovered while I was at uni that I love this and I want to go and do that. And that's a really common thing nowadays. And then aside from that, now, as opposed to 20 years ago or 30 years ago, now throughout the course of your career, you'll have on average 11 and a half jobs. And more often than not, that will include at least 3 or 4 career changes through that time. Not just job changes, actually changing the entire industry that you're working in. And the average number of years that someone will spend in one job over their career is now 4.4 years, which is a massive shift in the way that you move through that. I've been trying to get to this I try and fit a picture of a unicorn in every single presentation we give. So what I was trying to say is that's a massive shift in the last 20 years. So the question is, what's changed? And this is supposed to represent the internet. There's pretty much everything good about the internet in one picture. So the internet happened. So things started changing really quickly in the late 90s through the early 2000s. And people could learn new skills without having to wait for it to become a course. I know that I also studied computer science at uni, and I know I learned, amazing. I learned more in my spare time about programming for the internet than I did in an entire university degree, because the course structure just wasn't geared up to staying up with the languages that we're developing. It's actually easy to teach people online. It's just really hard to charge for it, as people are finding out, and people are learning every single day online. The other thing that the internet has done is it means that businesses and jobs are changing every single day. So jobs are becoming redundant. The skills that you need to do a particular job are changing every day. So no longer can someone spend 20 years just repeating the same thing and using the same skills to do the same job. What you do in that particular job might be totally different in 12 months' time, thanks to the internet and technology. And whole businesses are folding, new businesses are emerging, and new career paths are emerging.
I think it's an interesting point about the teaching online. That, like through Tractor and we're quite passionate as business about education as well. We're involved on many levels in lots of different educational kind of institutions and stuff. And something that the same question keeps coming up, especially amongst sort of established teachers and stuff, is, can we teach online? Can we create a course online? Can one day we move to this place where people can learn through the internet? Can we deliver our courses online? And I keep saying that and trying to explain that, as far as I'm concerned, we already are learning online, and in fact probably most of the education that an individual, by the time they're 25 or 30, gets, most of the real education they get comes from the internet in one way or another. It's just schools can't charge for it. And we're about to show you some stuff about some guys that are talking about this exact thing. It's not about it's not about can we learn online. It's about can we still learn in schools, I guess, is probably a better question.
Yeah, so, I mean, we've been talking about, you know, since we've been in business, we've been talking about learning by doing and how important it is and all that kind of stuff. But a little while ago, saw a video on TED. So, that's an amazing video. If you have time, it's Sugata Mitra. It's on TED Talks. It's had a lot of views. And he's talking about, he goes on to talk about what he then was able to get these kids to learn. You know, fundamental skills that could get them jobs. You know, like they taught themselves English because the computer that he gave them wasn't in Indian, it was in English. So they were able to teach themselves English and learn the commands and all this amazing stuff. So if you get the time, it's called Building a School in the Cloud. It's a really, really amazing talk. And this is you know, when we first saw this and we talked about it, we didn't actually believe that it could actually happen.
Yeah, I thought, you know, he was talking sort of metaphorically, but he literally created like ATMs that were like specific computer programs that only had a specific sort of information on them. Obviously had no access to the net, and it would just be physics. He'd just leave a computer with physics, and he repeated this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and come back and test village kids on physics, and they would pass university level degrees.
And we're taught, or we have been taught in the past that, you know, to learn, kids need a structured environment, they need a curriculum, they need steps, they need all this kind of stuff. The only thing that he gave them was the tool to do it, time to play with it, and verbal encouragement. So he would say, you know, when they'd come to him and he'd test them and they'd get it right, he would say, wow, that's amazing. And that's pretty much the only thing that he did. There were no incentives, rewards, there was no structure around what he actually taught them. And I think that's a perfect example of how now with the internet, how play has become our biggest learning tool. You know, because every spare second that we have, we can now be learning something. It's not about going out and finding a teacher or creating finding a structure or a school or something that can teach us in a really measured way. It's about having access to information and to stuff that we can learn from and then just doing it.
Yeah, and we're sort of taught that the learning you do at school or at university or through a course, you know, is like real learning, and stuff you teach yourself is sort of internet learning. It's not the same thing, but it is the same thing. And he was testing people with the same tests you get at university, and these kids were passing in the same way the kids from privileged schools were passing. And certainly on that encouragement thing, which is one of the most important things, partially because we're taught that this isn't proper learning, he created a process for encouragement, which is basically recruiting grandmas and having them Skype in to classrooms where all there was a screen with a grandma saying, yeah, you guys are doing a great job, wow, that's amazing. And another screen with the internet and her posing, or not even posing questions, just giving encouragement when they were finding the answers. And watching the results of the schools that he's created, some of them are in Australia, some of them are in, you know, very remote areas, are absolutely amazing. Kids standing up and explaining like the relationship of atoms just from Wikipedia.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, we both find that really, really exciting, but then the question remains, so what now, and how does that relate to work and running a business and all that kind of stuff? So the problem is that jobs traditionally were not the place you went to learn. Jobs were the place you went to go and practice and reiterate the skills that you'd already learned, and because if you deviated from that, it was a bad thing because, you know, you could fuck it up. So now the problem is that when we go to work, what we did yesterday might not be the same as what I'm doing today, because the internet and technology has fundamentally changed the job that you're doing. So what that means for us as business owners and, you know, for people, you know, starting out in the business world is that we need to create work environments that encourage non-formal learning. Basically, we need to create workplaces that encourage play in a structured environment so that the people that work for us, and us included, and the business is learning organically every single day by doing new things and by pushing the boundaries. And that's a very fundamental shift from the way that businesses are used to running. So practically from our point of view, for years, since Nick and John started Mentally Friendly and since I've been working with them, that's how we've run the business, not even realizing that we were doing anything that meant something or anything like that. It's just the people that we are. And so we've, through doing that, when we were putting this together, had to think about some of the fundamental rules that we've kind of stuck to unknowingly, that, you know, we feel were relevant to how we've managed to build a business that is based on play. So this is a nice little collection of, you'll notice these guys here, it's an amazing photo. This is a collection of photos, old and new, mentally friendly, and just like a few of the playful aspects of the business.
Yikes. All right, so MF started, I guess, when John and I were at uni. There was probably a couple of different phases. The first phase was sort of deciding who we were and deciding we wanted to start a studio. And that kind of mainly took place in the last year of Billy Blue. We love Billy Blue then and now, think that it's an amazing school. But during third year, felt like the playtime was giving us more than the educational kind of structure time, as Flynn hinted at. We didn't spend a lot of time at Billy Blue in our third year. We spent a lot of time we had part-time jobs, and we also had a lot of freelance. So we spent a lot of time up until 4 o'clock in the morning, as is probably typical of design students, I guess. You know, messing around with Illustrator, trying to design logos for businesses that didn't exist or that we thought should exist for potential clients, or you know, just anything. That was like just consuming a lot of Froget and watching a lot of Super Troopers.
Meagering.
Yeah. And you know, got really obsessed with branding as not the craft of creating a logo necessarily, but the concept of creating a brand and what that meant and how it was communicated and all that kind of stuff. And then the second phase, I guess, was once we left Billy Blue with the kind of the money that we put together from our freelance. We got a studio, some computers, and we filled it with all the stupid shit that designers tend to fill studios with in the first instance.
And
Voltron. But you know, spray paint. You know, we had a huge shelves full of all different bits and pieces. It was very unstructured in that sense. Where it was structured though is we're moving very kind of loosely towards this goal of we love the internet and everything that it's providing us and the classes that we did get in that, and we love branding, and we feel like at some point we can merge these. We can build brands through experience, and that kind of took the shape of sort of flash sites and stuff like that at the time, which is just what we kind of saw as like a moving logo, and we can engage people through this experience online. And you know, completely unknowingly started sort of moving towards this digital strategist role, which we as an industry have started to create for ourselves over the last 10 years. And you know, doing it by all different kinds of play. So we had like a space that was not sort of dissimilar to this in terms of size. It was a total shithole though. And we rented desks out to all the guys we went to uni with. Some of them were illustrators, some of them were painters, you know, some of them were other designers or typographers, and kind of tried to pull them in to help us with our web projects, and learned so much stuff about each of those trades from each of those people. Some of the most interesting stuff we actually did was trying to fuse kind of paintings with websites, which was like a real Flash thing to do, I guess, you know, really heavy JPEG driven sites. And I guess that started us down this track of, you know, fashion labels and artworks online and interactive experiences versus websites that taught you anything necessarily. And then that drove us into building businesses, and that drove us into e-commerce, and you know, the obsession with making those more successful led to our analytics tools and our knowledge of conversion rates and all those things. And even though none of that stuff was taught to us at school, we are genuinely experts at it now because we've gone through that process.
Yeah, and a lot of it didn't exist when you were at school.
Yeah.
So, and when I met up with the guys, that's one thing that struck me, is that they were incredibly creative people. But one thing that Mentally Friendly had at its core was that it was play with purpose. And that's probably, for me, the most important thing about using play in the business context, is that it has to have purpose. You know, there has to be a point to what you're doing. Otherwise, you're just going to spend your time going round and round, you know, playing around with, you know, HTML and CSS, or playing around with Illustrator, or whatever the case may be. And there's like a couple of really fundamental ways that we feel that you can do that. So the first one is stick to stuff that you believe in. So, you know, like one thing that we really find is necessary for us moving forward is remaining focused. So remaining focused on the stuff that we really are passionate about and that we really believe in, and not trying to do all these crazy other things that we can do because we're really playful and we'll give anything a try and all that kind of stuff, but really focusing on the stuff that we are genuinely passionate about. There's plenty of other people who are passionate about doing, you know, events or, you know, like TV ads and all that kind of stuff. We're really passionate about digital, and that's what we want to do.
And that works in the same way, I guess, as like an agile backlog. You know, it's obviously more formal in that scenario, but I kind of think of it more like the shower test. If you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about it in the shower, then that's the stuff I want to do during the day. If we realize that we're not, if we realize that we're not, and that stuff just starts to drop away, and all of a sudden that's one less service that we're sort of offering to our clients because it's not something that we're passionate about anymore, and it's probably because it's not working as well or it's not as useful to them.
And then the other ones are like, choose stuff you love so much that doesn't feel like work. Because obviously, if you've got a job and you're playing with other stuff, trying to work out whether it could be the next career or your next job and stuff like that, it's going to take time. It's going to be after hours. It's going to be weekends. It's going to be all that kind of stuff. But you know, and a lot of our other businesses we do in our spare time because MF takes up the majority of our days. But it never feels like work. It never does, because it's play. You know, it's something that we're so passionate about. It's something that we love so much that it doesn't matter whether it's midday on a Saturday or 3 a.m. in the morning on a Wednesday. It's not really work. And in line with that, you need to have a goal. You need, like, this shouldn't just be a hobby. Like, you can learn how to use Illustrator, that's fine, but that's just a hobby. If you're learning how to use Illustrator because you want to do this, because you want to start this business, or because you want this career, then that, you're going to get somewhere. You're not just...
It's just focus, isn't it?
It's just focus.
I think that's what he found with those ATM, like computer ATM things, is that when he just had the internet, people would learn stuff and that was all cool. But when he gave one specific program on there, like physics for instance, then they could pass a test on that subject. So when he gave them focus.
Yeah. And the final one on play with a purpose is just start with a problem. So it goes in with having a goal. So you know, if you start with a problem, you know, like we did with Grand Social, for example, which is that, you know, fashion labels couldn't really fulfill orders for their online stores, they didn't have the know-how, all that kind of stuff, then it's a lot easier to reach that destination than if you just start out with, oh, I'm going to start playing around with something to do with e-commerce or something to do with fashion.
Yeah, and I found that with GS massively. In the beginning, we were helping build these kind of brand sites that had e-commerce attached to them. That was part of the sort of brand experience for GS. But it became obvious to me that I was procrastinating a lot with how are we going to get these products onto the internet for them. I spent a lot of time unpaid for them, thinking about better ways for them to fulfill their orders because they kept on stuffing it up because it wasn't their core business. And you know, just we're procrastinating. It's like, well, we should be charging for this procrastination. Let's charge for it. Let's learn about it and let's do it. And I guess that, you know, that goal of making products onto the internet get there quicker somehow, and then to people's houses quicker, kind of gave us like a problem to solve, which turned into a business, I guess.
Yeah. So the second one is play with friends. Think about them in the shower and so on and so forth. So it's easy for us to say that because that's how we've done it. It's not for everyone, but playing with friends is a really amazing way of turning like passions and, you know, hobbies and stuff like that into careers, because it gives you like-minded people. You surround yourself with people who are thinking about the same things, who are motivating you, who you can bounce ideas off. And that, when you think about human nature, is actually really the definition of play. You know, you're playing with a group of people, you're getting feedback, you're learning, you know when you do things right, you know when you do things wrong, and it's the same in business. It's the way that you can grow.
Yeah, and I think like this is a really interesting point because, you know, lots of people have different kind of theories on whether you should work with friends or hire friends and those kinds of questions. I mean, obviously you don't just hire friends because they're friends to do stuff with you, but if you can create, I guess, a family atmosphere, that is the culture that big agencies spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year trying to manufacture. And it's, you know, hard and maybe impossible to do. The reason that it works so well for us is because we are all friends, and we were before we worked together, especially at a director level in our business MF, but in all our businesses. And you know, with Tractor, we'd known Simon. He was actually our headmaster, and we'd been in contact with him for 10 years. A good example, I guess, is our London office. The guy who is the director and runs that business was like the first ever non-kind of friend employee that we had. He came to Australia on, like, he was backpacking basically, and we became friends. You know, went and had he only worked with us for 6 or 8 months. Became friends, went and had every Christmas with him for like the last 6 years. Spent lots of time with him and his family. You know, ended up kind of begging him basically to come back to come, like let's come do it in Sydney. He was working for like one of the best mobile agencies in the world at the time. We really wanted to get into mobile. We wanted to do it as best we could. We wanted him to come and do that for us. He couldn't, but we got him to start that over there, and running an agency, which is another agency which is completely out of our time zone, I don't think would be possible if I didn't absolutely trust that person. And you know, we're like family. Like we can scream at each other, we can tell people what we think, we can, you know, call at 4 o'clock in the morning, because, you know, it's like a different environment to I guess a formal working relationship.
Yeah, and a lot of agencies try and start offices overseas, and you know, start with 3 or 4 people, and you know, play around with it, but it never goes anywhere. You know, because you know, they don't have the right people, and you know, all that kind of stuff. But you know, we've found it really successful to have someone that we trust so implicitly, you know, a friend, that we can get to do it. So the next one is quite simple. It's make it fun. We found this like really amazing quote from T.S. Eliot, which is, "Only those who risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go," which sounds lovely, but it actually means something in the context of business, in that unless you stretch your imagination, especially as an entrepreneur, but also as a creative or just someone working in the creative industry, unless you have the opportunity to stretch your imagination beyond what you would be doing if sitting at your desk doing client work, then you'll never know how good that client work can actually be.
And a good example of that, practically speaking, is we use at MF, we use the Walt Disney kind of model of like dreamer sessions and realist sessions to separate out the process of coming up with ideas to the process of deciding whether it's a good idea or not. And in those dreamer sessions, it's like anything goes. And it's enforced that anything goes, to the point that if you say no or point out why something couldn't happen, then you have to wear a purple hat. And the idea is to keep it fun, and to really push to come up with ideas that aren't possible, because you know, we dial that back a little bit, back off, find out what will kill you, back it off just a little bit, maybe that's where something really interesting might happen.
Yeah, and there's like, I mean, it's often difficult, you know, balancing clients and employees and all that kind of stuff, but fundamentally, like if you create a place that is fun to be at, you know, there is a thing that people will want to keep coming back, they'll want to keep working hard, and they'll want to create good things, and a playful workplace, hopefully, you know, will create playful products, which then are as equally fun to use for people out in the real wide world, you know, like a website or an app or whatever like that. You know, if it's made with fun, then hopefully it'll be fun to use, and that means that it'll get more use. Love a good double entendre. Okay, so finally, you know, the thing that we have learned about doing all this play is that it's created all these amazing businesses. And as an agency, it's been a really unique opportunity that, you know, from my experience, like, traditionally only companies like Google with their 20% time and Facebook with their hackathons and all that kind of stuff were able to do, which is have their own kind of sandboxes and playgrounds for their employees and for the staff and the directors and everyone to actually dream and play with and create stuff outside of the constraints of like a client and a brief and a timeline and a budget and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and often studios talk about having like an incubator program or something, and we don't have anything as formal as that. But we try and make our studio into that. It changes as time goes on, and the ideas that we come up with that stick, and there's enough people in the studio who are passionate about continue and get our effort and get our time, and they grow.
Yeah. So those are kind of like our 4 learnings from like building a business based on play. And you know, like I think the fundamental thing is that it takes structure. Just play by itself has no purpose. It is defeating, you know, what you're trying to do. But giving it some structure, and you know, whether that works for you or not, is the fundamental core to succeeding in turning something that you love doing into something that you can charge people money for or get paid for, basically. And just quickly, because I know that we're just about out of time, but you know, I read this awesome article on The Onion ages ago, which is like someone's take on, you know, what it means to have passions, and it's that to find the thing you're most passionate about, then do it on nights and weekends for the rest of your life till it kills you. You know, which is a really like sad way of looking at it, because non-work, guilt-free play is still really, really important to the process. So stuff, aside from all that stuff that we've been talking about, you know, it's really important to, no matter how much you love what you do, and the more you love it, the harder it is to step away from it. No matter how much you love what you do, it's really important to be able to step away from that from a development point of view. And I just wanted to prove that we're not completely boring and spend all our time working on the business.
Yeah, we do all sorts of different stuff, and you know, make time for it. You know, sometimes kind of eating slightly out of work time, I guess. But you know, like this is a car that I'm building. That is what it looked like when I got it. And I'm not a mechanic. I've never done anything like this before, and I've just been teaching myself how to do it for like the last 2 years. And it's, you can see the top left there. That's where it was on Saturday. So it's getting there. It's taken 2 years, but I'm teaching myself how to do it.
Yeah. And also like social media as well.
Yeah, and it obviously crosses over. So I started an Instagram account to kind of chronicle the journeys of this thing, and it's kind of exploded to a couple of thousand people. So I guess that kind of crosses over a bit.
Yeah. And from my point of view, you know, also mechanical stuff I find really interesting because I spend most of my day at a desk. So there's a bike that I sort of tore apart and rebuilt with varying degrees of success. I also do a lot of exercise, a lot of exploring, and still occasionally a little bit of DJing. And this, well, we're just wrapping up, but the reason why practical play is so important is there's a lot of studies that have shown that people who have done practical play and do practical play, such as puzzles, mechanics, things like that, it is a crucial element to building problem-solving skills, which are essential both to creativity, you know, designers every single day are problem solvers, but also to running businesses, you know, every day has a myriad of new problems. Yeah. And there's, you know, places like NASA have, now actually have, finding out about people's play habits is a fundamental part of their employment process, you know, in that they can be hiring someone with a magna cum laude degree from an Ivy League university, but they need to know whether this person has spent time playing with other things.
Do they build models on the weekend?
Do they build models on the weekend? Do they work on cars, whatever? Because if they don't, their problem-solving skills aren't going to be up to scratch for an organisation like NASA, and I think that's a really, really interesting way of going about it.
I can just also do that.
Yeah. So I guess the outtake from that is that all this is fun, but you shouldn't feel guilty about play because it's a fundamental way in which we learn, and there is a lot of good that can come from it.
And you are actually learning. Yeah,
and we're often made feel guilty about it, like, oh, what did you do on the weekend? Oh, well, like, oh, I spent the weekend, like, you know, building, you know, like this or that. It's a really fun thing, and it's a really important way. So a couple of key takeouts, I guess, are procrastination is just unbuilt passion. You need to learn how to charge for it, you know. Play with purpose can become a new business or a new career, or as we've talked about, you can actually create a job that never actually existed before for yourself or within a company. Playtime is valuable, don't waste it just by going to the pub, although going to the pub and getting drunk and collaborating with people is obviously good. Collaborating. And finally, something that we absolutely firmly 100% believe in is that play is the best way to learn new skills. You know, you have all the tools available to you right now to learn pretty much anything you want, and it's a really exciting time. So going back to the previous one, don't waste it. That's it.